They tried to write your ending before you could speak your truth, but the plot twist is you lived long enough to expose theirs. My dear chosen ones, lean in for a moment, because what I'm about to say isn't just an introduction. It's a verdict that flips the entire script back onto the ones who wanted you erased. And yes, I said wanted because, make no mistake, the people who dragged your name through the mud, who pushed paperwork against you with precision, who whispered lies in crowded rooms and silence in empty ones, they weren't preparing for justice. They were preparing for your obituary. They fully expected that by the time this court date finally came back around, your story would be over. Case closed, body cold, mouth shut. They counted on you becoming a memory before you ever had the chance to testify. But here's the idiom they never learned. The one they counted out is the one who shows up and counts the cost. And chosen one, you showed up. Before we move further, let's call this situation exactly what it is. Not a misunderstanding, not a coincidence, not a simple legal dispute. No, this was an operation, a blueprint, an orchestrated fade-out designed to have you mentally broken, emotionally vacant, or physically gone before your truth could ever hit the air. These people didn't just underestimate you, they invested in your downfall. They were watching the calendar like gamblers waiting for the final card, praying the deadline would deliver the outcome they were too afraid to say aloud, that you wouldn't make it to see your own defense. But look at you, chosen one, breathing, steady, sharper than the day they tried to bury you, and that alone is enough to shatter everything they built behind closed doors. Maybe you've asked yourself, why did they go so far? Why did they smear me, isolate me, provoke me, then vanish like ghosts when things got quiet? The answer is brutal but simple. People who fear the truth fear the person who carries it. They weren't trying to win a case, they were trying to eliminate a witness, because dead men don't testify and broken minds don't remember details. They wanted you exhausted, unhinged, discredited, or gone. Anything but present, aware, and ready to speak. Another question you may have whispered to yourself in the dark. Why me? Why was I the target? Because you're the chosen one. Not chosen in some mystical sense, but chosen by circumstance, by resilience, by the sharp clarity you earned through surviving what should have destroyed you. Chosen because you hold information they can't control. Chosen because you are the only one who walked through the fire and came out holding the receipts. Chosen because your silence scared them and your survival humiliates them. And here's the metaphor they never saw coming. They tried to treat you like soil, something to be buried and forgotten, but all the while you were seed, pressure-fed, darkness-grown, waiting for the right moment to break through concrete they swore would hold you down forever. They buried you to end you. Instead, they cultivated you. So understand this, chosen one. This moment isn't just a comeback. It's the uprising they swore you were too broken to lead. It's the unmasking of every whisper campaign, every trap, every strategic delay they thought would drown you. This court date they weaponized as your expiration is now your stage, your spotlight, your moment to show every person who doubted you why their predictions were premature and their calculations fatally flawed. They thought you'd be gone by now, but you're not just here, you're ready. Now let's pull the curtain back. The real story starts right here. Chosen one, before we break this open piece by piece, I need you to ground yourself right here with me. Your presence in this moment isn't random. It's evidence that you've already outlived the version of you they were counting on disappearing. If you feel that truth in your chest, don't just watch. Stay. Hit that like button so this message reaches every other survivor who was counted out. Subscribe so you never walk into battles like this alone again. And if you're ready to confront the reality that they expected you gone before this court date even resurfaced, drop 88 in the comments. That number tells me you're done being underestimated. If you want to show deeper support, you can use the super thanks. Every bit helps this message reach further. And now, let's break this down step by step. Because if you truly are a chosen one, you're about to feel these words in your bones. These aren't coincidences. These are the exact signs that have followed you since the day they tried and failed to erase you. Only the chosen recognize this pattern. Only the chosen survive it. Let's get started. Number 1. They didn't open a case. They engineered your collapse blueprint. They didn't build a case against you. They built a trap they planned to seal shut. When someone digs a hole for you, chosen one, the real punchline is watching them fall into the pit they designed. My dear chosen ones, hear this clearly. What they filed wasn't a case, it was a countdown. A quiet, calculated trap dressed in legal language, wrapped in polite signatures, and timed like a ticking clock they were certain you wouldn't live long enough to outrun. They weren't preparing for a courtroom discussion. They were preparing for a disappearance. Your disappearance. And that's exactly why this hits them so hard now, because the person they thought would crumble under pressure is the same person reading these words with a steady pulse and a sharper mind than ever. That alone is a blow they never prepared for. You might be wondering, why did they treat paperwork like warfare? Why the delays? Why the silence after the chaos? Because, chosen one, they weren't waiting for justice. They were waiting for your collapse. They thought the long stretch of time before the court date would finish the job for them. They expected the stress to snowball, the rumors to multiply, the loneliness to choke you out just enough that when the day arrived, you wouldn't. They weren't stalling, they were strategizing. They were counting on time to do what they couldn't do openly. Let's call it what it was, a trap disguised as procedure. The dates were spaced out not to give you time to prepare, but to give your anxiety time to rot your spirit. The accusations weren't built on truth, but on the hope that you'd be too mentally exhausted to challenge them. The gaps in communication weren't accidents. They were pressure points, timed perfectly to leave you guessing, doubting, unraveling. They wanted you so drained, so empty, so stripped of your identity that you'd walk yourself into the grave they dug for you long before you walked into that courtroom. But here's the idiom they forgot. The trap you set often snaps on the hand that set it. Chosen one, you didn't collapse, you adapted. While they were praying for your breakdown, you were learning the pattern, noticing the shifts, reading the silence they thought would confuse you. Instead of crumbling, you became observant. Instead of breaking, you became strategic. Instead of fading, you became focused. And now look at the irony. The very court date they designed as your finish line is becoming the spotlight they never wanted shining on them. They expected a ghost to show up. Or not show up at all. Instead, they're about to face a survivor with clarity, receipts, and resilience they never accounted for. The case they built like a coffin is splitting apart, not because of lawyers or loopholes, but because you're still standing. Your survival alone has already cracked their entire structure. What they intended to bury you with is turning into the evidence of their motive. The courtroom they thought would swallow you whole is turning into the arena where their intentions get exposed piece by piece. Chosen one, this was never about who was right. It was about who would still be alive and alert when the truth finally surfaced. And you, against every odd they counted on, survived long enough to speak. That's the beginning of their downfall. Number 2. Your breakdown wasn't predicted. It was scheduled on their timeline. They didn't predict your breakdown. They scheduled it like a deadline. They expected you to miss. The biggest miscalculation your enemies made, chosen one, was assuming your mind would shatter on their timetable, not realizing pressure creates diamonds, not corpses. My dear chosen ones, this part is going to hit deeply because it exposes the level of intention behind what you survived. Your mental collapse wasn't something they merely anticipated, it was something they counted on. These people didn't just believe you might break, they built an entire timeline around your destruction. They treated your suffering like a calendar event, marking dates and moments where they expected you to fall apart so completely you wouldn't have the strength or clarity to defend yourself once the court date came back around. This wasn't chaos, this wasn't coincidence, this was choreography. They expected your breakdown to unfold step by step, like they were following a manual on psychological sabotage. Emotional silence, Chapter 1. Social isolation, Chapter 2. Financial pressure, Chapter 3. Mental collapse, the finale. They wanted the stress to stack on your shoulders until your spirit buckled under its own weight. They wanted you sleepless, appetite gone, disconnected from your support system, questioning your worth, losing pieces of yourself one day at a time. They thought your mind would quietly self-destruct before the world could ever hear your truth. And that's exactly why they moved so slowly, so quietly, so strategically. That's why the paperwork kept flowing while the people around you went cold. That's why the phone stopped ringing. That's why the conversations dried up. They were watching you, chosen one, not out of concern, but out of expectation. They were observing your unraveling like spectators waiting for a show to reach its tragic ending. The silence wasn't innocence, it was surveillance. And the truly twisted part? They didn't fear the court date. They feared you making it to the court date with your mind intact. Because if you showed up whole, aware, and lucid, their entire plan crumbled. Their only hope was your collapse. Their only strategy was your disappearance, mental or physical. They weren't betting on truth. They were betting on trauma. They were counting on your past wounds being strong enough to reopen, your old triggers flaring up, your exhaustion taking over. They thought your mind would betray you long before they ever had to. Chosen one, sit with this. They had more faith in your downfall than in the lies they built. But here's where the story flipped. You didn't collapse. You transformed. The pressure they assumed would pulverize you ended up refining you. The isolation they crafted became the environment where your clarity sharpened. The emotional silence they imposed became the space where you rebuilt your inner strength. And while they looked away, waiting for news that you had crumbled, you were quietly evolving into someone they never saw coming. Now look at them, uncharacteristically quiet, uncomfortably tense, unsure how to interpret this version of you. They expected a ghost to show up, someone hollowed out by stress and pain. Instead, they're about to face someone who walked through mental warfare and emerged with a steadiness that exposes their entire operation. You didn't just survive what was meant to destroy you. You became the living contradiction to the outcome they planned. And that, chosen one, is the one thing they never prepared for. Number 3, your survival crushed an entire network betting against you. Your endurance didn't just hold, it bankrupted an entire crowd betting against you. Nothing rattles a crowd of conspirators more than the person they bet against walking into the room alive. My dear chosen ones, let's talk about something the enemy hoped you'd never discover. Your downfall wasn't a solo wish whispered by one bitter individual. No. Your collapse was a group investment, a team effort, a collaborative project powered by people who gathered behind curtains, behind screens, behind fake smiles, all hoping for the same outcome, that by the time this court date resurfaced, you'd be gone, broken, or erased beyond recognition. They didn't just gossip about you, they strategized. They didn't just predict your fall, they funded it with their time, their conversations, their alliances, and in some cases, their money. Imagine that. A whole circle of people coming together, not to build something, but to end you. That's how much your truth threatened them. You might be asking yourself, why did so many people get involved? Why was I worth that level of effort? Because Chosen One, your existence disrupts narratives. Your clarity disrupts lies. Your resilience disrupts the comfort of those who built stories on shaky ground. Some people saw you as a problem simply because you refused to play the role they wrote for you. And make no mistake, they were organized. Your name became their secret currency, passed around in group chats, whispered in late-night calls, dissected in living rooms where your presence was never invited. They exaggerated your mistakes, rewrote your intentions, and constructed a version of you they could collectively hate. It wasn't truth they were chasing, it was convenience. It was a fantasy where your disappearance solved all their problems. The court date, that wasn't a legal deadline to them. That was their scoreboard, the finish line they were waiting to cross once you were too exhausted, too unstable, or too broken to stand up for yourself. Some even built plans for their life after you were gone, emotionally wrecked, socially dismantled, or mentally checked out. But then something unexpected happened. You lived. You endured. You kept going, even when everything and everyone was pushing you toward collapse. Chosen One, your survival shattered their entire operation. It didn't just disrupt it, it made them look ridiculous, because nothing ruins a conspiracy faster than the target walking in with a pulse, a clear mind, and a backbone they swore you didn't have. Your existence forced them to face a truth they never wanted to confront. All their scheming amounted to absolutely nothing. Hours of planning, months of whispering, every ounce of energy they invested into your downfall, wasted, gone, burned to ash by your refusal to die, break, or disappear. And now they're the ones avoiding eye contact. They're the ones deleting messages. They're the ones rewriting their stories in real time, scrambling to distance themselves from the mess they created. Because when the Chosen One survives the storm designed to kill them, the spotlight doesn't follow the survivor. It swings back onto the architects. They wanted you gone before this court date came back up. Instead, you walked in like the living proof that every single one of them miscalculated. You weren't just stronger than they expected. You were the one thing they could never control, the survivor who ruins the plot. Number 4, they studied your pain but never calculated your rebuild mode. They counted your setbacks as your ending, never realizing you were built for a comeback they couldn't quantify. They mistook your silence for surrender, not knowing Chosen Ones reload in the quiet. Chosen One, this part cuts deep because it exposes just how calculated their underestimation of you really was. These people dissected your life like a lab experiment. They mapped your pain like it was data they could weaponize. They studied your breakdowns, charted your triggers, replayed your past struggles in their minds like analysts building a case study. They convinced themselves that the worst moments of your life were permanent weaknesses, as if the version of you they last saw was the only version that would ever exist. They weren't just counting on your pain, they were counting on you staying stuck in it. They believed your grief meant you'd never rise. They believed your exhaustion meant you'd finally fold. They believed your quiet meant you were done. They mistook your stillness as emptiness, never realizing that Chosen Ones don't fall apart, they recalibrate. You might have wondered, how could they think I wouldn't bounce back? Why were they so confident in my collapse? Because they built their entire plan on an outdated blueprint of you. They used your past as their prediction model. They thought the wounds you carried were still open, bleeding, and defining your every move. They believed your history of pain guaranteed your future defeat. But here's what they never understood, Chosen One. You are not made of the same material they analyzed. They measured your nerves, your breakdowns, your visible cracks. But they never accounted for the force underneath all of that. They couldn't quantify your internal rebuild system. They couldn't calculate the way your mind resets, the way your resilience regenerates, the way your inner fire reignites after every fall. They didn't factor in your evolution. Chosen One, what they thought was your ending was actually your reboot sequence. Your silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. Your absence wasn't collapse. It was recalibration. Your stillness wasn't defeat. It was the calm before your next rise. They expected you to come back as the same broken version they last interacted with. Instead, you came back as an upgraded model, stronger, sharper, emotionally armored, mentally fortified, less reactive, more precise, less wounded, more aware. Imagine their shock when the person who was supposed to be mentally dismantled walks in with clarity. When the person they counted out becomes the one counting every move with razor precision. When the one they tried to bury shows up not weakened but evolved beyond every limitation they assumed would cage you. Chosen One, understand this clearly. The old version of you, the one they mocked, underestimated, and gambled against, that version did die. But what they never prepared for was the emergence of the version standing here now. The resurrected you, the recalibrated you, the strategic you, the unstoppable you. And here's the part that rattles them to their core. They have no blueprint for this version. No predictions, no leverage, no control. They can't study what they can't understand, and they can't defeat what no longer operates on the same frequency. You didn't just come back, you advanced, and that evolution alone is a threat they never saw coming. Number 5. The court date marked the expiration of their manufactured illusion. The court date wasn't your deadline. It was the expiration date on their illusion. When people set a timer on your destruction, Chosen One, they forget that clocks run out on both sides. My dear Chosen Ones, let's break this wide open. They didn't just mark that court date on a calendar. They circled it like a finish line they were certain you'd never cross. In their minds, this wasn't just a legal date. It was the day everything they threw at you was supposed to land. The day every rumor, attack, smear, and psychological blow was meant to peak. The day you'd be too exhausted, too overwhelmed, or too broken to show up and defend yourself. They created a timeline, not for justice, but for your collapse. See, Chosen One, they weren't just filing motions, they were setting traps. They believed that if they stretched the waiting period long enough, your strength would diminish. They thought each delay would chip away at you. They imagined you spiraling into confusion, isolation, and fatigue. They expected that by the time this date resurfaced, you'd be nothing more than a shell of yourself, if you were here at all. This wasn't coincidence, it was calculation. They used silence as a weapon. They used time as pressure. They used every emotional tactic they knew, hoping the weight of it all would cause you to implode. They built a psychological maze, convinced you'd get lost in it. They whispered lies behind your back and waited for the echo to hit you. They pushed narratives into the world designed to corner you, weaken you, and make you question your own stability. They timed your destruction. But here's the twist, Chosen One. Timing works both ways. The more they pushed that date back, the more space you actually gained. What they meant as a countdown turned into a wind-up. What they intended to break you ended up building you. Every delay they celebrated as your downfall became an opportunity for you to observe, to recover, to strategize, to grow sharper than they ever expected. Isolation didn't crush you. It clarified you. Silence didn't suffocate you. It recalibrated you. Delay didn't defeat you. It redesigned you. While they predicted your collapse, you were forming a version of yourself they were never prepared to face. You weren't fading. You were becoming. You weren't falling apart. You were rebuilding from the inside out. You walked through every heavy moment they engineered, and instead of being diminished, you became undeniable. And now here we are. The day they turned into a trap has become the spotlight for their exposure. They expected a ghost to appear. What they're getting instead is a fully present, fully aware, fully awakened force. A chosen one who didn't just survive the waiting game, you outgrew it. Everything they projected onto you is turning back toward them. The anxiety they hoped you'd drown in, now it's theirs. The whispers they used to smear your name, now echoing around them. The pressure they hoped would break you, now collapsing their own narrative. This date isn't your downfall, it's the expiration date on their lies. They miscalculated your endurance. They underestimated your evolution. They forgot that when someone refuses to die on cue, the entire script collapses. Chosen one, you're not the one on trial anymore. They are. Number 6. The silence they celebrated was actually your loaded strategy. They thought your silence was surrender, not the strategy that would end them. A quiet chosen one isn't broken, they're loading. My dear chosen ones, let's strip the mask off this part of the story. The biggest mistake they made wasn't underestimating your strength. It wasn't even counting on your absence by the time this court date came back around. Their fatal error was misreading your silence. They looked at your stillness and saw weakness. They looked at your lack of reaction and assumed defeat. They mistook your quiet for collapse, because that's what amateurs do. They don't understand that some storms don't come with thunder. Some storms arrive with calculation. While they were laughing in group chats, rewriting history in whispers, and fabricating narratives as if the world was their stage, you were sitting in the shadows, not wounded, but sharpening. You weren't hiding. You were studying. You weren't breaking down. You were downloading. And chosen one, this is exactly where their plan started to crack. You didn't speak because you were powerless. You stayed silent because you knew the timing had to be perfect. Silence, for someone like you, is not retreat. It's reconnaissance. It's the pause before precision. While they were fabricating stories, you were watching patterns. While they were spreading lies, you were saving receipts. Every inconsistency, every contradiction, every slip of the tongue, you caught it all. They thought you weren't paying attention, but chosen ones always pay attention, even in exhaustion, even in isolation, even in moments when the world thinks you're down for the count. They believed they had the upper hand because you weren't defending yourself loudly. They thought that meant you didn't have anything to defend with, but they didn't realize your silence was a strategic vault, storing everything they thought you'd forget. They didn't see you tracking alliances, noticing betrayals, clocking who benefited from your downfall. They didn't see you preparing a version of the truth that didn't need dramatics, just timestamps. And now, here you are, walking back into the arena they built for your demise, not as a victim, but as a fully assembled archive. They're about to learn what happens when a calm storm finally speaks. The version of you they targeted is gone. In its place stands someone composed, upgraded, and lethal with facts. Someone who is not reactive, but surgical. Someone who doesn't need to yell, because truth speaks loud enough without volume. They were counting on your confusion, your trauma, your exhaustion. They believed the emotional chaos would fog your memory. They bet everything on the idea that you'd arrive scattered, unsure, or not at all. But chosen one, you walked through hell and came out not only intact, but clear-minded. Clear enough to remember every detail they hoped would slip through the cracks. Clear enough to expose patterns, motives, and contradictions they forgot they even left behind. And this is what terrifies them now. Your existence is evidence. Your presence is proof. You don't have to oversell your story. You don't have to convince anyone. You just have to exist, calmly, coherently, completely. And everything they built starts to fall apart. They thought you'd be gone by this court date. Instead, you're more dangerous now than ever. Because you, chosen one, didn't just survive the fire. You walked out carrying the documents. Number 7. Your presence alone became the evidence they feared most. Your existence isn't just a story, it's the evidence that shatters their entire illusion. When the truth refuses to die, Chosen One, every lie that tried to replace it collapses under its own weight. My dear Chosen Ones, let this sink in. You are not merely participating in this battle. You are the proof that exposes exactly why they wanted you gone before this court date resurfaced. Your survival wasn't expected. It wasn't planned for. In their perfect scenario, you were supposed to be a faded memory, a confused shadow, a walking contradiction too unstable to defend yourself, let alone reveal what really happened. But here you are, alive, aware, unbroken, and that alone is enough to bring their entire strategy down like a tower built on stolen bricks. You might wonder, why does my presence shake them this much? Because Chosen One, systems like this, whether legal, social, or psychological, rely on silence, confusion, and erasure. They count on people breaking down, forgetting details, doubting their own experiences. Most people fold under pressure. Most people question their reality when enough gaslighting and manipulation is thrown at them. That's the loophole your enemies were depending on. That you would lose clarity long before this day arrived. That your memory would splinter, that your voice would crack, that your mind wouldn't be strong enough to hold on to the truth. But you didn't fracture. You didn't fade. Instead, you remembered everything. Chosen One, that makes you dangerous. Not in a violent way, but in a factual, undeniable, courtroom-shifting way. You are not a rumor. You are not speculation. You are not a vague emotional story that can be dismissed because you seem upset. No. You are a living archive, a walking record of events they never wanted revisited. Every detail you recall is a blade that cuts through their fabrication. Every moment you survived becomes a contradiction to their narrative. Every breath you take in full clarity is the evidence they prayed would never resurface. Think about that for a moment. They didn't just expect you to disappear physically. They expected your mind to collapse. They were counting on trauma to steal your memory. They were depending on confusion to cloud your voice. They wanted you fragmented, fogged, and fragile, because a person with no clarity is easier to dismiss than a person with sharp recollection. But Chosen One, your clarity is now their undoing. Your composure in the face of chaos, your ability to recall what they hoped you'd forget, your resilience against the breakdown they engineered, all of that has become the foundation of your power. You standing here with a coherent mind is more threatening to them than any lawyer, any witness, or any piece of paperwork. Because paperwork can be twisted, stories can be edited, testimonies can be challenged. But your sheer survival, your awareness, your precision, that cannot be erased, rewritten, or spun into a lie that anyone will believe. Your existence is the open file they never wanted reopened. Your voice is the courtroom they can't control. Your memory is the mirror they cannot escape. Chosen One, understand this fully. You don't just have evidence, you are the evidence. And that is why they feared your survival more than anything else. Because as long as you're breathing, standing, and remembering, the truth is alive with you. And no system, no enemy, no plot designed to erase you can change that now. Number 8. Their hidden debts are now lined up for public detonation. Their consequences are loaded, and this court date pulls the pin. The louder they lied behind your back, Chosen One, the louder the truth will echo when it finally hits the room they can't escape. My dear Chosen Ones, understand this. What's brewing right now isn't just a court appearance. It's a collision between everything they buried and the one person they never expected to outlive the burial. These people stacked their actions like a tower of hidden explosives, confident no one would ever see the wiring underneath. But consequences don't disappear simply because someone hides them. They accumulate. They wait. They gather weight like storm clouds, collecting pressure until even the air feels electric. And Chosen One, this court date isn't the end of anything. It's the ignition point. For years, some of these individuals built reputations on polished lies. They spoke about you in whispers, doctored narratives, twisted facts, and exaggerated stories until even they started believing their own fiction. They didn't just try to make you look bad, they tried to erase you. And why? Because they assumed you wouldn't be alive, mentally stable, or strong enough to ever confront their fabrications. They underestimated the very thing that makes a chosen one dangerous: survival. Maybe you're asking yourself, why does this moment feel bigger than the case itself? Because it is. This isn't just a legal matter, it's the unraveling of a long chain of secrets these people thought would never see daylight. Every lie they told depended on your disappearance. Every smear relied on your silence. Every accusation assumed your collapse. But you didn't collapse. You endured. And by outliving the version of you they planned to destroy, you automatically triggered the domino effect they hoped would never come. This isn't karma in some mystical sense. This is consequence built from action. Truth built from persistence, exposure built from survival. They created the mess. The clock simply ran out on how long they could hide it. And the part that's cutting them the deepest right now? The realization that the one voice they tried to smother has become the system-breaking alarm they can't turn off. The truth you carry isn't calm or quiet. It's volatile, it's disruptive, it's the kind of truth that doesn't just shift the courtroom, it ripples into every space your name was twisted, into workplaces where rumors were passed, into family circles where false narratives spread, into friend groups where your absence was treated like evidence, into communities that confidently painted you as the problem. They thought your silence meant safety for them. But chosen one, your voice is the pressure release that detonates every hidden chamber they built. And here's what terrifies them most. Once the truth starts moving, it doesn't stop neatly. One revelation opens the next. One inconsistency exposes another. One lie reveals the whole architecture. The skeletons they stored so carefully are about to claw their way out in broad daylight, and there is no door they can shut fast enough. All because you survived long enough to speak. You, the one they counted out. You, the one they mocked in private. You, the one they expected to be long gone by now. Chosen one, your voice isn't just a statement. It's the pin pulled from the grenade they built themselves. Number 9. They tried to bind you through paperwork, masquerading as power. They didn't file paperwork. They engineered a maze they thought you'd die inside. When people can't defeat you in truth, chosen one, they drown you in paperwork and pray you never resurface. My dear chosen ones, this part might sting, not because it's harsh, but because it's the reality you've been living in, often without being able to put words to it. What they sent your way wasn't paperwork. It wasn't procedure, it wasn't protocol, it was psychological warfare dressed in legal formatting. It was a maze built with intention, crafted with precision, and designed with one purpose: to wear you down until you collapsed long before this court date ever returned to the calendar. They knew exactly what they were doing when they stacked form after form, motion after motion, clause after clause in front of you. They were counting on confusion to smother your clarity. They were counting on deadlines to suffocate your energy. They were counting on your mind being too overwhelmed to even breathe, let alone defend yourself. They didn't need proof. They needed pressure. They wanted the process itself to be the weapon. And you might have asked yourself, why does something as simple as paperwork feel like a coordinated attack? Because chosen one, that's exactly what it was. They understood something most people never realize. Words in the wrong hands can be traps. Signatures can be snares. Forms can be cages. They used the law the way a manipulator uses silence, not for order, but for control. The language was cold, strategic, and intentionally disorienting. They wanted you lost in the labyrinth, blaming yourself for not being able to keep up with rules designed to break you. Let's call this out with the clarity they hoped you'd never reach. They weaponized bureaucracy. They twisted procedural steps into pressure points. They played the system like a chessboard, expecting you to be too fatigued, too confused, too mentally battered to stay in the game. They believed that if they could get you to drown in the paperwork, they wouldn't have to face you in court at all. They wouldn't need a verdict. Your exhaustion would be the outcome. But here's where their entire plan fell apart. They misjudged the chosen one. You didn't panic. You adapted. You learned to read between the lines they tried to bury you under. You began to recognize patterns, how deadlines appeared right after emotional attacks, how filings aligned with moments they assumed you were weakest. You stopped reacting and started understanding. You stopped fearing the documents and started dissecting them. Your insight became sharper than their tactics. Your mind became immune to their confusion. And that immunity? That's what terrifies them now. Because, chosen one, you're not walking into this court date shaken or scattered. You're walking in with clarity that cuts through every tactic they thought would cripple you. You're walking in understanding the maze they built and knowing exactly where the exit is. You're walking in knowing that the same paperwork meant to bury you has become the trail of breadcrumbs exposing them. They counted on the system to silence you. But you learned the system well enough to silence them. They don't have another trick to pull. The maze has lost its walls. And now, chosen one, the only thing collapsing under the weight of all that paperwork is their plan. Number 10. The delay that was supposed to break you became your tactical reset. The delay wasn't a setback. It was the interruption that turned you into a threat. When someone tries to stall your progress, chosen one, they forget that stillness is where strategists are born. My dear chosen ones, let's clear the fog around this part of your story, because it's one of the most misunderstood and most powerful pieces of your timeline. The delay, yes, that delay. The endless rescheduling, the sudden silence, the drawn-out gaps with no answers, no movement, no clarity. It wasn't proof that the world was ignoring you. It wasn't a sign that your fight didn't matter. It wasn't rejection, punishment, or abandonment. It was an interruption engineered by life itself to shift you into a version of yourself your enemies never planned for. They expected the delay to drain you. They expected the waiting to turn your courage into doubt. They wanted the silence to suffocate your focus, to make you feel forgotten, unimportant, defeated before the battle even began. They thought the empty spaces between court dates would exhaust you mentally, wear you down emotionally, and blur your memory just enough for you to walk in unprepared, or not walk in at all. But here's the truth they could never calculate. What you faced wasn't denial. It was transformation time. Chosen one, you weren't being held back. You were being loaded, reset, rewired, reinforced. Every day that passed, every week that stretched, every month that felt like limbo was actually sharpening you into the contender they prayed you'd never become. The interruption wasn't designed to break you. It was designed to build capacity within you. The kind of capacity that only forms in pressure, quiet, and long stretches of forced reflection. If this case had rushed forward on their timeline, you wouldn't have had the clarity you have now. You wouldn't have gathered the information, the perspective, the emotional distance, or the renewed strength that now stands between you and the version of yourself they were expecting to face. The earlier timeline would have caught you mid-healing, mid-chaos, mid-confusion. They were counting on that. They wanted you raw, unstable, reactive, and overwhelmed. But the interruption, the very one they celebrated, flipped the script. Instead of unraveling, you calibrated. Instead of panicking, you observed. Instead of rushing in blind, you learned the layout of the entire battlefield. That's what makes you dangerous now. Their schedule was supposed to be the cage that trapped you. Instead, it became the training ground that elevated you. They thought the delay would weaken your voice, but instead it strengthened your articulation. They thought it would fog your memory, but instead it clarified every detail. They thought the waiting would exhaust you, but instead it stretched your endurance beyond anything they can match. Chosen One, the day they expected you to arrive defeated is now the day you arrive fully equipped. They thought they owned the timeline, but timelines only matter when the person on the other side is unprepared, and you are the opposite of that now. You're not walking into this court date as the version of yourself they targeted. You're entering as the version you grew into when everything slowed down and forced you to see the truth. You didn't just survive the delay, you weaponized it. And now the story isn't continuing, it's reaching the moment that flips the entire narrative in your favor. They thought the delay would bury you. Instead, it prepared you to expose them. This is where everything changes. Number 11. Your persistence cancelled the destruction they invested in. Your survival wiped out every attack they banked on. The most painful loss for your enemies is realizing every dollar, every rumor, every scheme they invested in your downfall ended up financing your comeback. My dear Chosen One, listen closely, because this part isn't just about what they did, it's about what they failed to do. These people didn't just hope you'd disappear, they wagered on it. They poured energy, resources, and intention into making sure you would never rise again. They didn't swing blindly, they calculated every move with the expectation that the pressure would eventually crush you into silence. They thought your mind would break, your body would weaken, and your voice would fade into the background like a forgotten echo. They believed that if they pushed hard enough, you'd collapse under the strain and vanish before this court date ever resurfaced. To them, you weren't just an opponent. You were an inconvenience they wanted erased without fingerprints, without evidence, without consequence. And yet, here you are, Chosen One, breathing, thinking, remembering, standing. A walking contradiction to every prediction they whispered in dark corners. You might wonder, why would people go this far? Why would they invest so much into destroying me? Because, Chosen One, they knew something you hadn't fully realized yet. You were the threat, not because of force or aggression, but because of awareness, because of truth, because you carried pieces of the puzzle they needed hidden. Your very existence became a risk to everything they manipulated, constructed, and sold to others as fact. They gambled on your collapse like it was a guaranteed return. They thought stress would poison your clarity. They thought isolation would dim your strength. They thought smear campaigns would bury your credibility. They even believed that psychological warfare would kill you from the inside out, long before any judge ever called your name. But every tactic fell flat. Every projection missed, every attempt to break you boomeranged back harder than they imagined. Instead of shattering, you sharpened. Instead of disappearing, you stabilized. Instead of losing your voice, you learned to use it with precision. Your survival didn't just inconvenience them. It canceled every move they made. It wiped out their entire investment. It exposed how far they were willing to go. It revealed the desperation behind their actions. You became the proof they hoped would never exist, the living record that invalidates their narrative. Their strategies didn't just fail, they backfired. The more you stayed alive, aware and grounded, the more their intentions began to crack in plain sight. Chosen One, the very fact that you're still here, preparing to face the court date they never expected you to reach, is a devastating blow to them. Your survival is the evidence they cannot silence, deny, erase, or reinterpret. You are the receipt they never wanted printed, the confirmation that their attempts to destroy you were both real and unsuccessful. And now, as this court date approaches, understand this. They're not just nervous about the truth you might speak. They're terrified of the truth your survival already proves. They thought you wouldn't make it to this moment. They were certain this chapter would end without you in it. But you, chosen one, you survived the very storm they paid to send your way. And that survival, that is the most expensive loss they've ever suffered. And now, chosen one, as we close this chapter, let this truth settle into your bones. The very moment they expected to mark your ending has become the moment you step into undeniable strength. Your survival isn't just a victory. It's evidence that every prediction they made about you was dead wrong. If this message hit home, stay with this community of survivors. Like this video, subscribe for more truths they never wanted you to hear, and drop 77 in the comments to show you're still standing. Share this with someone who needs to remember they were never meant to break.